this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
T-Mobile is reinventing business internet with super broadband. Whether you run a small office or a factory of 500, connection is everything. Powered by America's fastest 5G internet, plus Starlink. Super broadband from T-Mobile reaches every zip code in the U.S. Super broadband, a new era of business internet. Visit superbroadband.com to learn more.
Fastest 5G network based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence data 2H 2025. Speeds vary due to local network characteristics and management. Satellite requires hardware installation, clear view of the sky with 36-month commitment.
Jardiance has a big story to tell. Discover Jardiance empagliflozin 10 or 25 milligram tablets. Visit Jardiance.com, call 1-888-968-6648, or talk to your doctor to see if Jardiance is right for you.
A little pill with a big story to tell.
If you want all of your data in one place, you need the Intuit ERP. I'm Damon John, and I run my growing business on Intuit Enterprise Suite. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
This is Tab Ramos from Inside American Soccer. The Cup Knockout Round is now, and DraftKings has you covered for every single match. The DraftKings app is now available in all 50 states and includes all markets, bringing the game straight to your fingertips wherever you are. New DraftKings customers, sign up with code DK1, spend $5 to get $200 in rewards within 21 days. That's code DK1 in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Bet with DK Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, bet tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 and over. Void in Canada. Event contract trading with DraftKings predictions involves risk of loss. Availability varies. Bet to get bonus bets that expire in 7 days. Trade to get $50 in predictions dollars that expire in 1 year. Issued every 7 days via click-to-claim for 21 days. One non-withdrawable reward redeemable. Predictions offer void in New York. July 19th. Terms at dkng.co/audio.
You've reached American History Hotline. You ask the questions, we get the answers. Leave a message.
Hey there, American History Hotliners. Your host, Bob Crawford here. Happy to be joining you again for another episode of American History Hotline. You're the ones with the questions. I'm a guy trying to get you some answers. And keep those questions coming. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. That's americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. Extra points for sending us a video or a voice memo of you asking your question. Oh, and normally I'd say let's keep this question to this continent, but today is a bit of a special case. We're talking about America's favorite fighting Frenchman. That's right, Lafayette, the Marquis himself. I love Lafayette. He is one of these great figures from American history. We're going to get into it. I don't want to spoil it because we have an amazing guest to talk about Lafayette. But I got to say, there is a Lafayette John Quincy Adams connection. We'll talk about that later. And you know JQA is my favorite. Here to help me answer this question about Lafayette today is Lloyd Kramer, author of the book Lafayette in Two Worlds, Public Cultures and Personal Identities in an Age of Revolutions. Lloyd, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Bob. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, Lloyd, here's the question we were hoping you could help us answer.
Hi, this is Philippe in Paris. I love the characterization of Lafayette in the musical Hamilton, and I learned little about him in history class. But I don't actually know much about him. Who was the real Marquis de Lafayette? And why did he fight with the Americans during the Revolutionary War?
Lloyd, I want to start a little cinematically here with some action. Can you set the scene by dropping us into the Battle of Yorktown and what the Marquis de Lafayette was doing during that battle?
Well, the Battle of Yorktown would have been the culmination of his American experience in October of 1781, but it exemplifies his values, his style, and his success. He had been sent to Virginia in the spring of 1781 to capture General Benedict Arnold, who was by then fighting with the British. He never was able to capture Arnold, but he had a small detachment of troops, and he began tracking the British Army. When General Cornwallis came into Virginia later that year, he fought with him as a kind of guerrilla commander and ended up at Yorktown and said to General Washington, "I have him trapped. Bring the French army under General Rochambeau and your army, and we have the British captured here at Yorktown."
In Yorktown, there was this relationship. That's where a lot of us know that relationship between Hamilton and Lafayette. They had this Alexander Hamilton, of course, and the Marquis de Lafayette. They were both like sons to General Washington, correct?
That's correct. That you could even say there was a little rivalry between the two of them as to which one Washington would like best or support the most.
And okay, you go ahead.
Well, I would just say Yorktown was one of the places where they ended up together because, of course, Hamilton had been eager to have a more active military role. He had often done a lot of secretarial work for Washington. And they were both involved, Lafayette and Hamilton, in the command of troops that were to storm the redoubts that surrounded the British position in Yorktown. And I would just say one additional thing about that. Lafayette wanted to command, but he let Hamilton take the lead in the storming of one of the redoubts at Yorktown. And I think Hamilton appreciated that about Lafayette's generosity. And we might say that was a key to Lafayette's success in the American Revolution. Unlike many Europeans, many French people, he was always deferential to his American friends, starting above all with George Washington, whom he said, "I want to listen to you. I don't want to tell you what to do." But he got along with Americans so well because he had a style that was congenial, supportive, and the style of a listener rather than someone who just told people, "This is what you should do."
What a lesson for life. You're young and you get out of school and you start working somewhere. And I remember being told by someone who said, "You do your best. You soak up what we tell you like a sponge, and other people will brag for you. They will sing your praises. You just listen to whatever people want to teach." Okay, let's get back to the beginning for the Marquis. First of all, what was the Marquis de Lafayette's real name? Can you remember the whole thing?
Well, the whole name was something like Gilbert de Motier. Anyway, he was always called Gilbert. That was his name, Gilbert de Marquis de Lafayette. Marie-Joseph de Motier de Lafayette, something like that. I should know. I've written a whole book about him, but
that's right.
Nobody called him by his whole name, although he was called Gilbert by his close family. But the Americans just always called him the Marquis de Lafayette or General Lafayette. And his family was from an old aristocratic family in central France, an area called Auvergne, which is near Clermont-Ferrand in central France. His father had been a military officer in the French army, and he was killed when young Lafayette, Gilbert, was only 2 years old. He never knew his father. His father was killed during the 7 Years' War in a battle of Minden by a British military unit. So Lafayette grew up never knowing his father.
How did Lafayette get into military service?
So Lafayette lived till he was about 10 or 12 down in the countryside there in the South. But his mother's family was from the other parts of France, and she took him to Paris. She died when he was only about 12 years old. So by the time before he was a teenager, Lafayette had lost both his parents. But because of his mother's wealth, he inherited a whole lot of money. He was one of the richest boys in all of France. And there was a wealthy, influential family called the Noailles family. They had 5 daughters. They needed a wealthy young man. They arranged through family members that these 2 people, Lafayette and Adrienne, would be married. And they had a family regiment. And so he became an officer in the Noailles family regiment. He had already been in the military a bit, but then he became an officer in their family regiment.
I was watching the Ben Franklin series on Apple TV, and Lafayette is a prominent character. He's portrayed as a young military mind looking for a cause. He wanted to fight. Is that accurate?
I think he wanted to be famous. You know, this is an interesting psychological question. What made this young Frenchman differ from other people of his class and his community? He had studied the writings of Plutarch. I don't know if people are so familiar with Plutarch now, but Plutarch was an ancient writer who had written the lives of Greek and Roman heroes, great political and military leaders. And Plutarch had shown that noble, virtuous service was the way to get a public reputation. And he was an influential author for people of Lafayette's generation and the noble class. And I think this inspired Lafayette. He wanted to be famous from an early age. But there he was. He joined this family regiment and went off to eastern France, the city of Metz in the east. And for several years, he was just a young boy without too much prospect except to be another officer in a French regiment on the frontier. But he dreamed of being famous.
So how did he actually get involved in the American Revolution?
So this is one of the most interesting things. He was out there in eastern France at a French military base. And in the late summer of 1775, and remember, Lafayette was not even 18 years old at that time, the brother of the King of England came through on a tour visiting various sites in Europe. And he happened to come to this base, and the commander at the base, or other officers, invited Lafayette to have dinner with this brother of the King George of England. And this brother, the Duke of Gloucester, was critical of his brother. He actually sympathized with the Americans. He said, I think the Americans have some good ideas. I don't know why we're trying to defeat them over there. The revolution had just started, Battle of Bunker Hill. And Lafayette was fascinated by this. Lafayette had just joined the Freemasons, where he had begun to hear about ideas like liberty or the value of reason. And the combination of his education about great Roman heroes, the Freemasons, and then the stories of the Duke of Gloucester fascinated him, and he decided he wanted to get involved somehow in the American Revolution. But how to do it? That was the problem.
Okay. So how did he do it? What was the American response? Like what did they think of him when he showed up?
So first of all, how do you get to America if you happen to be in the French army, which has no relationship with America at that time? There was an American agent in Paris named Silas Deane who had been sent by the Continental Congress to recruit officers and gain support from the French government. But of course, the French were not officially at war with England, so they couldn't support what Deane was doing.
And this is 1775?
This was now, Deane arrived in December of 1776, and Lafayette began negotiating with him very shortly after that.
Okay.
So Deane knew that Lafayette's family, the Noailles family, was very influential, very powerful. And therefore, he would be a good recruit. And one of the officers who Deane had met told Deane about Lafayette. Lafayette went to Paris, secretly met with Deane. Deane promised him a position of major general by this, a 19-year-old boy at this point. If you go to America, you can be a major general in the army. But of course, there was no way for him to get there. So Lafayette secretly bought his own ship, a ship called the Victoire, and worked out a plan with some other officers who also wanted to escape and go to America. And in April of 1777, carrying a letter from Silas Deane, offering him a commission in the army, He sailed to America and landed near Charleston in June of 1777, 19 years old.
What's up, fam? I'm sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together and iHeart Women's Sports.
Because let's be real, women's sports is giving us way too much to talk about these days.
The highlights, the rivalries, the breakout stars, the moments that take over your entire timeline.
And the conversations that start during the game and somehow keep going all week.
Every week, we're breaking down the biggest stories across women's sports.
We'll give you our takes, our debates, and probably a few disagreements.
We'll talk to athletes, celebrate big moments, and get into what's happening on and off the field, court, track, and beyond.
Because we're not just interested in what happened, we're interested in why everyone's talking about it. Because everyone watches women's sports. So if you're already a fan,
or you're just getting into the game, there's a seat for you right here.
Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, I'm Hoda Kotb, host of the podcast Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb. Okay, if you know me, you know this. I'm always searching for inspiration, for support, and useful tools to help maximize joy. So this podcast lets us uncover all of that together. We're going to have these meaningful conversations with the world's most fascinating people, like when actress Olivia Munn shared how she overcame fierce health challenges that she never saw coming.
I've gone through breast cancer and then helped my mother through breast cancer, and that was more difficult. There's a lot of people who understand postpartum depression. I was not prepared for postpartum anxiety.
Olympic champ Shawn Johnson revealed why she had no choice but to be a gymnast.
There was something about gymnastics that was intoxicating to me. It's given me a belief that we all have one of those treasures inside of us. We just have to find it.
Listen to Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke and Yerin, Samira y Gracie. I'm so excited.
On the bouncy bed.
You have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to Suite 305, where the group chat comes to life. What up? Es como que una forma de decir como, hola amiga, hola mejor amiga, hola hermana, what up?
Mira, nunca lo había hablado con nadie. Excepto con mis hijos. Mis hijos sí saben.
Yes.
Sé mi amante.
Uf. Punch. Qué increíble. Ya la telenovela.
You're the only person I know that loves the yellow starburst.
It's lemonade. No hay alguien que te falta, como que tú dices, me gustaría colaborar con esta persona. This is Suite 305. Listen to Suite 305 with Lele Pons as part of My Cultura podcast network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jake Brennan, and on my podcast, Disgraceland, I tell the stories behind music's biggest names, the moments, rumors, and real-life events that help shape their legacy. Like the story behind Sonic Youth that starts with downtown New York cool and ends with album art inspired by a true crime. Sonic Youth was not fronted by a groupie hustling alpha like David Lee Roth. No, Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore was an artist in love with a fellow artist who just happened to play bass in the same band with him and his other artist friends. Her name was Kim Gordon, and Thurston and Kim were every bit as cool as the couple on the cover of Goo, the same couple involved in one of the UK's darkest true crimes. Disgraceland is part of the Exactly Right Network. Listen to new episodes every Tuesday, bonus episodes Thursday, and rewinds on Sunday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the American History Hotline. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Today, my guest is Lloyd Kramer, author of the book Lafayette in Two Worlds, Public Cultures and Personal Identities in an Age of Revolutions. Today, we're talking about the Marquis de Lafayette, a man who joined the ranks of one-name celebrities like Cher and Bono. To us Americans, he's simply Lafayette. Before we get back to the conversation, we want your help. Record yourself using the voice memo app on your phone and email it to AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. That's AmericanHistoryHotline@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. Lloyd, okay, so Lafayette comes to the United States. He is a 19-year-old major general. Take us back to the first meeting between him and Washington.
Okay, thank you. He arrives in Charleston with a promise that he can be a major general, but he's not yet a major general. He travels overland. It took about 4 or 5 weeks, maybe more, to get to Philadelphia. He goes to the Continental Congress in the summer of 1777 and says, here I am to be a major general. And the Congress just looked at the letter and said, great, but we don't need you. He at first was rebuffed. But about that time, by this time, Benjamin Franklin was in Paris, and he wrote a letter. And the Congress got the letter, and Franklin said, this guy Lafayette, whom he had met briefly, this guy Lafayette has important family members. You ought to take him seriously. Lafayette then somehow he was able to meet George Washington at the City Tavern in Philadelphia in late August, and they immediately connected. And Washington also decided, because he had heard about Lafayette's family, especially his in-laws, and Washington said, okay, we'll make you a major general. The Congress approves it, but you will get no pay. So Lafayette served in the entire Revolutionary War as an unpaid major general in the Continental Army.
So my image of Washington is he's a tough guy. He's not going to smile. It will take a lot to impress him or catch his eye or his ear. How did Lafayette do it? I mean, do we know?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about Washington's attraction to Lafayette. We know, of course, that Washington had no son. He had a stepson, but he had never had a son. And we know that Lafayette had no father. Remember, Lafayette's father died when he was 2 years old. And the age differential made them a kind of father-son connection. And Lafayette, from the beginning, conveyed to Washington that he was there to help, to listen, to support the cause, and not to tell anybody what to do. Washington was a realist who knew that the Americans needed the help of powerful people in France. He was also a human being who warmed to Lafayette's personal style, to Lafayette's willingness to listen, and to Lafayette's energy and ambition. So Washington and Lafayette formed an incredible bond that never broke for the rest of their lives.
Tell us about some of the notable battles that Lafayette, I know we already talked about Yorktown a little bit, but what were some of the notable battles that Lafayette fought in, and how did he perform?
So his first important battle was at Brandywine, just literally a couple of weeks after he had joined as a major general. This was outside Philadelphia. The British were coming to Philadelphia to try to drive out the Congress. And the Americans were on the defensive, and the British were winning this battle. And this was Lafayette's first battle. This 19-year-old boy, he saw the Americans pulling back, and he raced toward the soldiers who were retreating and said, hold your ground. I don't know how he said it in English. He had been learning English on the boat coming over. And he was shot in the leg, fell to the ground, but they held the line. He was rescued by Continental soldiers, and Washington heard he had been wounded, and he protected him and sent him to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, to be healed by Moravian settlers in Pennsylvania. That was his first battle, and it gave him a lifelong credibility as the Frenchman who shed his blood for the American cause. But he was later in other battles. He returned. He was at Valley Forge during the winter. He was at the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse the following year. He was at a battle of Barren Hill, where he was almost captured, also near Philadelphia. But in 1778, after the French-American alliance was signed, he went up to New England to coordinate with the arrival of a French fleet that was coming to Newport. That didn't go so well. It didn't really lead to any success. But then in 1779, he went back to France and help arrange with the French government to send an army. And he was a key negotiator with Benjamin Franklin and the Comte de Vergennes, the foreign minister of France, to convince the king to send an entire French army, which they did in 1780.
So Lafayette was pivotal in having the French enter the war on the side of the Americans. Is that, can I say that? Is that
I wouldn't
arguable?
say pivotal. I mean, a lot might turn on that word. I think the French had their own reasons, and this 20-year-old boy wasn't the decisive reason. But he was a major player. He corresponded with Vergennes. He worked closely with Franklin during that time when he went back to Paris in 1779. He strongly advocated that the Americans could win. That was something the French wondered about. And when things went badly in America, he would write letters and say, these are brave soldiers. They can do this. They can win. And he helped to facilitate the French agreement to join the war. He hoped he might be the commander himself, but the French government realized they needed an experienced commander, and they appointed General Rochambeau, who was a brilliant general and an important figure in the success of the French army.
And this culminates at Yorktown, where we began our conversation. So what happens to Lafayette after the war? Like what I never understood is, why didn't he stay in the United States? He is beloved at this point.
So, of course, he had married his wife, Adrienne de Noailles de Lafayette, was back in France. He, by this time, had a child, George Washington Lafayette, and he wanted to go back to his family, you know. Plus, he was ambitious. He wanted to make a career in France. So he returned to France after the war. He made one more trip to America in 1784 and took a tour around a number of states and had a long visit with George Washington. In fact, in the aftermath of that visit, he wrote to Washington and proposed that they join together in a campaign to abolish slavery. This is the first moment of Lafayette's advocacy of the abolition of slavery. And he said, you know, my dear general, you could have a huge impact if you freed your enslaved people. And I would like to buy a plantation in French Guiana down in South America, and I would do the same. We'll both announce that we are freeing our slaves. And Washington said, well, that's a great idea, but I don't think the time is right. Lafayette himself went through with the plan. He bought 2 farms in Guyana with enslaved workers and launched a plan to train those enslaved workers and to free them. But then when the French Revolution came in 1789, the project had not been completed. He lost all his land and he never succeeded in that project. But Lafayette went back to France and became an advocate for human rights. Especially, he joined a movement to abolish the slave trade. He became an advocate for the rights of Protestant French people who did not have equal civil rights. And then when the French Revolution began in 1789, he became the commander of the Parisian National Guard in 1789. And I should just note one other great contribution he made in the French Revolution in the first stage. He introduced the first proposal for the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen to the National Assembly in July of 1789. And after the Bastille was stormed by the crowd on July 14th, the French National Assembly appointed him to be the first commander of the Parisian National Guard.
But something happens during the French Revolution, unfortunate for Lafayette.
Well, the problem Lafayette had was he was a kind of middle of the road person who wanted a constitutional monarchy. He did not want an absolute monarchy, as some of the conservative monarchists continued to want. But he was also not in favor of a republic in France, as the more radical Jacobins began to favor. Therefore, he managed to alienate both the right wing and the left wing. I think anybody who knows about how intense polarization can be in politics can understand Lafayette was in the middle, and he managed to alienate people on both sides. He demanded more freedom for the people when he talked to the monarchists, and he demanded more law and order when he talked to the radical revolutionaries.
I think this is a good time to remind our listeners, or to make them aware, that if you want to know the whole story of Lafayette, his time in America, his time in France, his early life, his later life, read Lloyd's book, Lafayette and Two Worlds, Public Cultures and Personal Identities in an Age of Revolutions. Also, check out Lafayette in the Somewhat United States by Sarah Vowell, another great book about Lafayette. Okay, let's jump ahead. This is the moment I've been waiting for the whole interview, because people last year went crazy in this country for Taylor Swift's concert tour. They paid exorbitant sums of money. Well, 200 years ago, I believed it was started in 1824, fall of 1824, something like that. Lafayette returns to the United States after being away for how long was he? Like
40 years, from
he was away for
1784.
40 years. He comes back. This is after the French Revolution, after he's jailed, after all this, he comes back, and he comes back with his son, George Washington Lafayette, and he tours the United States, and people went bananas for him. Tell us about this tour.
Okay, let me just note very briefly that after 2 or 3 years in the French Revolution, he had to flee for his life. He was arrested by the Austrians. He was thrown in prison for 5 years, solitary confinement. Napoleon Bonaparte ultimately helped him escape. He went back to France.
Lloyd, is it true that when he was in prison, his wife went into prison with him to take care of him?
She left France in about the 2nd or 3rd year of his imprisonment, getting out of prison herself, where she had been placed by the radicals. And she went to his prison in Olmütz in eastern, what would be in the Czech Republic now. And it was in the Austrian Empire. And she stayed with him until he was freed. He went back to France eventually, but he opposed Bonaparte because he believed Bonaparte was an authoritarian, which he was, and he refused to collaborate with Napoleon. After Napoleon fell from favor or power, Lafayette became active again in French politics, but he also lost his position in the Chamber of Deputies in 1824. And President James Monroe, knowing about Lafayette's situation, invited him on behalf of the Congress to make a return tour to America, in part because Monroe wanted to say to the Europeans, this is the man whose values, his commitment to rights, his belief in democracy, his belief in human freedom, this is the man we recognize and honor in America. And Lafayette came back in 1824 because he was out of a job, and he also wanted to make a political statement in Europe. And as you say, his visit was like a tour of Taylor Swift or, you know, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. He was a rock star.
Hey, it's also interesting, Lloyd, that if anyone who they're all online, go back to the Congressional Record, all the different incarnations of the Congressional Globe, the Congressional Record, Register of Debates. You go back to 1823, 1824, the Congress is debating the money it's going to cost to send the ships to go pick up Lafayette and bring him here. Like it's all there. And it was this incredibly in a very divided country, right? Where 1824, We're coming off of the Missouri Compromise, which was incredibly divisive. We're coming off of a global depression. 1819, there was a terrible economic downturn. And this was a moment that kind of brought the country together.
Well, it was, but it's amazing because he arrived in New York in August of 1824. And it was the beginning. It was really when the presidential campaign of 1824 was taking off. This is John Quincy Adams. This was the most divisive campaign since 1800 when Jefferson and John Adams. And the country was torn apart because Adams and Jackson represented different regions of the country, different values. Adams, the more educated Northeasterner, Jackson, the populist from Tennessee. And the only thing everybody could agree on was Lafayette was a great man. And Lafayette was very careful to remain nonpartisan. He would greet people of all sides. He toured first in the Northeast. He spent the winter in Washington. And then he took a tour of the South and went to all 26 states.
I got to respectfully interrupt you. He stayed in Washington. He stays for a time, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, he stays in the president's house. Now we call it the White House. And he and his entourage stay in the president's house. And Louisa Catherine Adams, John Quincy Adams' wife, she was ready for the guests. The house guests, it's fun to have people for a little while. Then it's time to go.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was a difficult thing because people wanted to be around Lafayette. So wherever he went, it wasn't just Lafayette. There were lots of people coming there. So let me just say about why Lafayette had such an impact. As I said, he had visited all 24 states, but wherever he went, he gave kind of the same speech. He said, first of all, that America had shown how to have a successful revolution. These were themes that were very important to the emergence of American national identity. America had shown how to have a successful revolution and to create a constitutional government in which people abided by the laws and guidelines of a constitution. And he said the success of this system was confirmed by the prosperity and economic growth of the country. And he said, I know that George Washington and the people who I knew in the Continental Army, they would approve of what you have created. Now, you can imagine what this meant to people when the country was so polarized, so anxious. It was the moment when the founding generation was passing away. And here comes somebody as this a ghost from George Washington's camp to say, I knew George Washington. And General Washington, nobody called him George. General Washington would be so pleased to see how this country has grown.
We've been talking with Lloyd Kramer, author of Lafayette in Two Worlds, Public Cultures and Personal Identities in an Age of Revolutions. Lloyd, thanks for joining us on American History Hotline.
It's a great pleasure, and I hope people will continue to explore the life of Lafayette. It's very important. Could I recommend just one other book?
Please.
There's a book by Mike Duncan called Hero of Two Worlds, the Marquis de Lafayette in the Age of Revolution. And it's a more recent biography, and I think it also provides a lot of very helpful information. I would recommend that as well.
Well, when an author recommends another book on the same subject, you take that recommendation. Plenty of great books now that our listeners have been assigned to read and enjoy. Lloyd, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks for what you're doing with this podcast. It's very important to keep history in the public conversation.
You've been listening to American History Hotline, a production of iHeart Podcasts and Scratch Track Productions. The show's executive producer is James Morrison. Our executive producers from iHeart are Jordan Runtall and Jason English. Original music composed by me, Bob Crawford. Please keep in touch. Our email is americanhistoryhotline@gmail.com. If you like the show, please tell your friends and leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Bob Crawford. Feel free to hit me up on social media to ask a history question or to let me know what you think of the show. You can find me at Bob Crawford Base. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
What's up, fam? It's sports journalist Ari Chambers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your girl, Sam J.
And we're the hosts of Everyone Watches Women's Sports, a new podcast from Together.
We're breaking down the biggest headlines, the viral moments, and the stories everyone's talking about across women's sports.
From game-changing performances to culture-shifting conversations, we'll give you our takes, our debates, and a few laughs along the way.
Because everyone watches women's sports. Listen to Everyone Watches Women's Sports
on the iHeartRadio app,
Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Joy is essential, and it's also elusive. But now, there's a new and exciting way to start your journey toward a more joyful existence. Joy 101. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Hoda Kotb. If you're craving inspiration to maximize your joy, tune into these candid, uplifting, and moving on-air chats. Open your free iHeartRadio app, search Joy 101, and listen now. Joy 101 with Hoda Kotb is presented by CVS.
My first guest is Paris Hilton, Shakira, Luke, and Yerin. Have surprises?
Many surprises.
Welcome to the Sweet 305 podcast, where the group chat comes to life.
What up? You're the only person I know that loves a yellow Starburst. It's lemonade.
This is Sweet 305. Here, oversharing is encouraged. Listen to Sweet 305 with Lele Pons on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, it's the Jonas Brothers. This week on the podcast, Hey Jonas, we're hanging out with Michael Bublé. After Kevin's recent interesting confession about Michael, we figured there's only one thing to do. We must invite Michael Bublé on the podcast, and we want to know what's on his Sexy Time playlist.
You know, I did an interview, and they're like, have you heard about this Jonas Brothers thing? And they were like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I mean, it's reciprocal.
We talk about Kevin's confession, Michael's reaction, and a whole lot more. Our conversation with Michael Bublé is out now. Listen to Hey Jonas on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Most people overpay for car insurance, not because they're careless, but because switching feels like too much hassle. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/Libsyn today. That's JERRY.ai/LIBSYN.